I happen to believe, and some of you have heard me use this quote, that climate change is the #1 moral, ethical, justice, civil rights issue that the church and the world face today. That doesn't mean that all the other issues around civil rights, all the other issues around violence and gun control, those all matter. But at the escalating rate of warming of the atmosphere and warming of the ocean and rising of the seas, we don't have 50 years to postpone this while we fix everything else. So this is the #1 issue that I think the church faces today. As a result of that, in 2010, the Diocese of Massachusetts voted at its convention to adopt the Genesis Covenant. Some of you have heard about it. It was started basically by one of our retired bishops, Bishop Charleston and others. It's an ecumenical thing. It's not just Episcopal, where you make a vow and a covenant to reduce our energy consumption by 50% in 10 years. So Diocese of Massachusetts is supposed to reduce its energy consumption by 50% by the year 2020. So in order to do that, we established a creation care season every fall, and that helps to raise funds. And some of those funds that were raised during those 8 weeks in the fall went to a green grant program that we started that Steve mentioned. And we raised $380,000 and through donations and gifts and the Bishop's Appeal. And that helped 50 congregations. And as part of a general capital campaign, the diocese raised $20 million, all for ministry, congregation development, everything out there, not for capital and so forth. And $2 million is going to go to green grants and green loans. So I hope that we will cover at least 150 of our 180 congregations in the next few years. So we take it seriously. We have to lead. The church has to lead. It's our moral example that we do this. And in case we're worried about what it's going to look like, this is Boston today. And this is Boston if we don't do anything, or if we don't do anything more than recycle and reuse and reduce. There's a lot we can do and must do. And Boston underwater. And of course we must lead because this is God's creation, and we are kin, as Francis tells us, St. Francis, to all creatures and all persons. We also have churches that are existing all over the world that are participating in this. This is a big movement. I wonder if anybody in here can tell us where these churches have come from. Somebody was here the last time. Pardon me? Sure, where? In New Mexico. Yeah. Yep, they're all from New Mexico. Tom took the pictures and got the pictures online, and there they are. So now the problem is, why are we energy hogs? Church buildings, I think many of you have heard, they're the biggest wasters of energy per capita than any buildings in the United States. That includes big office buildings and all kinds of buildings. And we are the biggest energy hogs in and we also, we are sloth, you know, that sin of sloth. I like to add that one of the reasons that we're not doing our job is inertia that comes from denial. We're fearful, or we don't know what to do, or we don't believe that the warming is as critical as it is. So that's what that have us. And there was somebody mentioned solar panels a minute ago, and I happened to read on the plane coming over here in another book that the Southwest United States, the Southwest where we are, if they made a commitment to renewable energy, solar and wind power, by 2050, the Southwest United States can provide 69% of the electric needs in the country. Not just for the Southwest, in the country. And 30% of all energy, if we made a serious commitment to renewable energy in the United States, and the Southwest is poised to perhaps be a major player in that. Yep. Now, which do you have? The photo on the right or the photo on the left? Obviously, the one on the right is brand new, replaced in was that St. James? Canton, St. James, Cambridge. We have these congregations. You can see the 50% drop in cost, saving $10,000 a year in Trinity, 40% drop in CO2. The Cathedral Church of St. Paul, just by light bulbs, 14% reduction in electricity uses, $12,000 annual savings and 10-ton reduction in CO2. St. James, bigger program, 26 annual savings on heating and 50% reduction in CO2. Boston Synagogue had AC situation. So, and it was heated by steam. And St. Andrews Wellesley, 13% reduction in carbon footprint, and just from windows alone. And the Charles Street American AME Roxbury is addressing their needs as well.
So the first of our set of 24 questions deals with behavior. Cost-free, but you must do it. First thing you got to know, what utilities are you using and how much does it cost? And you need to track that, not just annually, but you need to see it monthly. And understand, as is the case here, this is on gas for heating, it's in Northeast, but you know the heating degree days, otherwise known as how cold is it outside, so therefore how warm do we have to make it inside. You compare that month to month. So here we are, January a year later, the degree days are down by 14%. But what's going on here? 32% increase in gas use. The combination, 46%, nearly 50% more than last year. What is going on? Who left the boilers running? Who didn't turn the thermostat off? Or did you happen to have a 30-day evangelical use of the sanctuary? Oh, I'm sorry, we're talking to Episcopals. No, that wasn't happening. That's what you need to know and keep track of it, because it's those behavioral things, including forgetting to turn off the thermostats, that causes this stuff. And if you're not tracking it, you don't know. Same thing on the air conditioning. Degree days, kilowatt hours. You've got an issue here where the degree days are down in the second set of year, but the use is up. Why? What's happening? Why aren't you paying attention? When we did an evaluation for the Diocese of Massachusetts, a third of the parishes reported $1.5 million for energy. You know, when you add it up, it really makes a big difference in a range of under $10,000 a year to over $120,000, a range from 2.6 to nearly 20% of the budget. And we had somebody in the earlier session talked about 48% of the budget. If you listen to Steve's presentation about what's a tipping point for a parish being in problem, if you're spending 48% of your budget for energy, you've tipped way over. Creation care is not part of what's going on. So, basic question. Is your heating and cooling system serviced regularly? And the reason for that, of course, is that these are functioning, almost living creatures. You need to have them taken care of by capable people. You wouldn't yourself live without having a doctor. Somebody to do at least an annual physical. Or in Steve's case, he needs it at least twice a year. Well, you blow a lot of hot air, so you're like you're like one of these systems. Yeah, you've got to do that. And you've got to have that contractor there who can take care of it and be technically capable and keep you up to date. Question about water. A whole lot of it's going down the drain. Do we really need it to be at the volume we're going down? And here's a simple answer. How many people know how much water goes down the drain when you turn on the faucet in the bathroom? Anybody? Okay, let's quantify it. 2.2 gallons per minute. 2.2 gallons per minute. You're washing your hands. No, you're not putting your water on your hands much. You don't need that amount. You can change a faucet aerator for $2, $3. Maybe if you got a particularly expensive hardware store, it's $4. To 0.5 gallons per minute saves you over 75% on your water use and saves that amount of domestic hot water you have to generate without any loss to the functionality of the faucet. Dual flush toilets. Basic data. 6-to-1 ratio of urination to defecation. You don't need 1.6 gallons per flush for number one. And the case is, by the way, if you have gray hair and you're male like me, it's more than 6-to-1 ratio. So you can save a lot of water, and you can do that at your church. We've got a preschool at my church in Brookline. Checked first with the preschool folks. Are the kids going to be able to deal with this? Sure, we take them in and so forth. A lot of these conversion kits or the new toilets, they've literally got a number one and a number two. It's real easy to figure out. Save over 50% on your water. Shower heads. Do any of your churches have showers in them? Okay, we got at least one nodding here. Most places, and probably because some churches provide shelters, but generally, no, you don't. And so you don't have showers, but this is where we're talking about the stewardship extending into the parishioners and saying, what are you doing at home? Most shower heads at home, 2.5 gallons. Just changing the shower head, you drop your water use in hot water by 40%. How many of you, any of you have teenagers at home now? Okay. Are the showers more than 30 minutes on average? Yeah. No? You've got good kids. Because when we dealt with the Diocesan Youth Council in Massachusetts, I asked the same question. Nobody raised their hand when I said, whose shower lasts less than 30 minutes? And I know that our granddaughter lived with us between age 14 and 21, 45 minutes on average. I don't know what she was doing in there, but that's a lot of water. It's a lot of hot water. And so we created, and this is on your thumb drive, a little Excel program where you can literally put in how long's your shower, what's it cost you, and for the type of heat you got, oil or gas or electricity, and you will find out. And it turns into hundreds of dollars a year if you're going for 45 minutes. A behavioral thing. Just close it down, shorten it. Okay. Next set, buildings. And by the way, as we're going along, you got questions, please interrupt. We'll try to answer them as we're doing it. Let's deal with the building itself. Do you have zones that match usage patterns, heating and cooling zones? In other words, do you basically say, on Sunday I can heat just the sanctuary? On the days that the offices are open, I can heat or cool just those? Can I deal with these rooms if that's where AA meets separately and so forth? Or like this church in Brooklyn, which had also above this section, big fellowship hall, and above that, a gymnasium, do you have just one thermostat for one zone? So that when somebody came into the office, oh, by the way, where do you think the thermostat was? No, the thermostat was in the sanctuary. Hardest space to heat. So when it was that, all during the winter, people in the office are having the windows open because they had to keep it going to make sure also that the gym was available for after-school programs, which was a mission of the church. But boy, was that costing an arm and a leg. Actually, 2 legs in that case. So you want to match up the spaces when they're heated and cooled for when you're using them. And the other thing to think about is heat for people, not the space. So when you were saying about the office, in that case, what I told them was, get a little heater for the office administrator when that person is present and just let that person get heated. Don't turn on the thermostat for the whole building. Because it's the person that needs to be heated, not the building. And that will, when you do the zones, depending on what else you do, but just zoning, anywhere from 5 to 30, 50%. When you saw the numbers that Bud mentioned about drops of 50% or more, it's those sorts of things. Okay. What's wrong with this picture? Speak up. The doors are open. Yeah, that's a zone. And through that door is the sanctuary, a separate zone. Guess what? This room is trying to heat the sanctuary. It's all going out. No good. I mean, you might as well just leave the door to outside open too for heating, or here in the Southwest for cooling, if you don't keep those doors closed between them. All right. Are your walls, ceilings, and floors insulated? We had some talk about old buildings and then talk about 1950s buildings. Old holy piles of stone, which some Episcopal churches are. Some used unholy stones. But 1900 church, 1880 church, 1860, no, you're not going to have insulation. And we've already talked about some that even in 1960 don't have particular amounts of insulation. A lot harder on the old ones to put insulation into the walls. But you can deal with ceilings and floors. In this case, that was that was truly the pilgrimage to the boiler room, and you knew that was a problem because as I went through, I'm having to get the cobwebs out of the way. Nobody had gone down there to deal with it, and it was a mess. And once you get down and in there, here you are underneath the sanctuary, wood floor. At least happily they had gotten rid of the knob and tube wiring, so they didn't have the problem of a possible fire. Cold space, just soil, under the sanctuary. Is it any surprise that at least at that church, the parishioners really weren't interested in kneeling? Because it was cold. So what you want to do in that case is insulate from underneath. Here you've got an older building where they have insulated. This is in the side, and on the other side was an office. So they added that insulation because you can tell this building was not built when you had fiberglass insulation you put in the walls. Here's a 1985 building, Pinehurst, North Carolina. That's the space over the office. You would think a building in 1985 had insulation, and probably it was in the building code, but guess who didn't notice? The inspector didn't notice. Anybody from the church didn't notice. At least in this case, it's easy to go and add it in. But what was also the case when I was there 2 years ago, that's 27 years later, something like that. And all of those years in the most occupied space, all of the cooling had been going right up through the ceiling. And here's what you can do. A lot of places can be insulated as a work day and a learning day about creation care behavior at your parish, at your house of worship. In this particular case, this was a 1903 building of some sort in which somebody had a brilliant idea. One of the rooms was kind of below grade, which we can do in New England. We build basements. And so it was cool. And they said, wow, if we put a duct that goes up to the parish hall above, in the summertime, we can open this duct and get cool air coming up. This is St. Mary's, Dorchester, by the way. And but like many churches, the half-life of memory is 10 years at most. So here we are 100 years later, and nobody has any idea why it's always so freaking cold in the parish house and parish hall in the wintertime. Well, that's because nobody ever closed the ductwork, so you're getting all of that beautifully great idea of having cool air moving up in the summertime, coming up in the wintertime too. Have to know, check, there are reasons why that happens. And so you find it out. And in this case, what we could do was simply fill the whole ductwork up with insulation so the air couldn't move up. And sure enough, the parish hall was warm. And they said, God is good. And I said, and so are you for being willing to act on it. Because just knowing is not enough. You have to do something about it. High efficiency windows. Thermopane windows, various sorts. But the basic question on our older buildings, and even on buildings that go back to the 50s and early 60s, didn't have thermopane windows. Single pane, which doesn't do much on either keeping the cooling in when it's summertime or the warm in when it's wintertime. So you can change your windows, and very often on the older windows, what you've got are these counterweights on either side of the window so they could go up and down easily. Well, that's great, except that's also a void, which is no insulation from outside. You can replace your windows with thermopane, nice and tight, in vinyl tracks, so you don't need the counterweight. Insulate, blow insulation into that old void. And by the way, the nice thing about windows and counter tracks and vinyl tracks like this, you can pop them out and wash the outside from the inside. Life is easier. Yeah, if you've got a rebate, in terms of money, right. If you've got a rebate program in your state and you're doing all of this, yes, you will get some rebate money for doing this improved thermal performance, particularly if it's done in concert with other things. Increase the energy efficiency of your heating or your cooling or both systems and so forth. Yeah, you want to do that. The other thing you can do on old weird places like this happens to be All Saints Brookline that has an old, overly done, back when we were the Republican Party at Prayer and had all kinds of money, building is you can put in interior storm windows, plexiglass. You can do it as a work day or you can have people build it. Easy to do. Many can be left in place, basement windows, for example, or as in the case here, that's our guild room, the fancy room. Some can be left in place even in the summer because it can help keep cooling in place. Easy to do. And you can tell because of the cast stone window surrounds and so forth, these will fit in virtually any place and be acceptable. I can tell you a story about that. I'm going a little longer in this, but it makes the case. Our property committee had a certain amount in our annual budget, and we could spend up to X before we had to take it to the vestry. We could make and build and put those in at about $50 each. There were 6 windows. There was only 300, well within our okay. We went and did it, partly because, I will now make a confession in the presence of the bishop, that if we went and asked the vestry, there was going to be somebody in the parish who said, oh no, we can't do that. It'll make it look horrible. Or something a little more crude. And so we just did it. Nobody noticed until one Sunday in February at the coffee hour, I got one of these, come over here, Tom. And so I walked over. Did you do something different in here this year? Oh boy, I said, I'm going to get it. I said, well, why do you ask? The answer was, because it's warmer. Yes, God. I love it. So come over, let me show you. Walk the person over. Gee, I never noticed those. Yes. It proves the case. You can do it. It works. Do it carefully, thoughtfully, but that's what we are taught. That's what we're taught.
As you were describing work that can be done, somebody needs to know quite what they're doing. The rest of us can. As you were describing what can be done, and it's simple for some of us and not so simple for others of us, I heard of a couple of projects. Mass Interfaith Power and Light helped us with one of them. We went out into the community and distributed light bulbs. That was before the state of Massachusetts was doing it. I believe that one of our congregations went out into the community and went to the library or the community room next door or something like that, and they did some of the energy conservation things. So we're talking about our own church buildings, but we're people in mission, and so, help your neighborhood too.
Okay, topic number 3, electricity. First question, do you have and do you acknowledge the appropriate artificial light levels? So tell me what's wrong with this picture. No, actually there's a good deal of sunlight coming in here and over here. You can see but notice up here, all the lights are on. All the lights are on. And if you're, and I turned them off, and if you're sitting there, this was on a weekday morning, about 11 o'clock, when you would be having the service, plenty of light to read the hymnal or the bulletin. And so the basic question, if it's a nice sunny day out, do you need to have the lights on? Do you understand what the light levels are for each of your rooms? Another quick story in anticipation. No, I'll just remember that picture because I want to tell you another story about it as we go along that has to do with energy efficient bulbs. For a number of years, all we really had was compact fluorescence. Annoying very often, but particularly because they wouldn't dim. And they also had these weird shapes that weren't bulbs, and so you couldn't put them in a lot of places. You can now have, with LEDs, the floodlights, candelabra bulbs, bulbs that are like bulbs that can go into lamps, and they're getting replacement for the long fluorescent bulbs that are in overheads. All of it, so where CFLs would reduce maybe 70%, LEDs will reduce by 90% what the incandescents were, and they last up to 50,000 hours. So, in that sanctuary we just saw, since they had to rent a lift to put them up, they had gotten a quote from an electrician to go do it for $1,000 for 16 bulbs. They said, wait a minute, we can do this ourselves. They rented the lift for $200. It was going to be standard incandescent that was going to last maybe 4,000 hours if they were really good ones, or only 1,000. So it was going to be $1,000 every couple of years if they did this. No, they took the other $800, $50. This was a couple of years ago when LEDs hadn't dropped down. It'd probably be $30 now for those. Put in LEDs that will last 50,000 hours. At 5 hours a week, that's 50 years for those bulbs. Everybody who was involved in putting those in is going to be dead by the time they have to be. And people will say, what does it mean to change a light bulb? You know, the joke will no longer be how many Episcopalians does it take to change a light bulb, but what does it mean? I don't know. I don't know. And the answer is one sexton. So here's your types, and up to 85% completion. As I mentioned already, the tube lighting, you can now also get LEDs. Just this year they're coming out, and they will also have the very long life. So your savings here at 20 to 40, you're going to have 40 to 60 to 80% on that, and the long life. And there are lots of places to put in, and they'll just be able to go into the same pieces of equipment. Are your appliances Energy Star? Just as not all Episcopalians are the same, not all Energy Star rated appliances are the same. You want to go to the EnergyStar.gov and go to their product, and they will give you the rankings of all, you want to get an air conditioner, you want to get and a refrigerator, all kinds of that stuff. I think there's 18 or 20 particular appliances, and you can find out what the efficiency is. Just like when you buy a light bulb, it'll say on it, and sometimes on appliances you will have, but rather than wait to go to the appliance store to find that out, go online and find it out. And if you don't know how to go online, there's got to be teenagers in your parish who can teach you how to do that, and will learn as a result to do something other than texting or tweeting or other useless activities. That's the only comment I'm going to make about my granddaughter. But do remember, when people offer things, look the gift horse in the mouth. You don't want this. This happened to be a refrigerator that was functioning in the basement of a building at Andover Newton Theological School that they had accepted. We ran a calculation. We opened it up, first of all, and there were 2 bottles of water in there. Nobody knew whose they were. But we ran it, and it was going to cost about $454 a year to operate that refrigerator. They could buy one for less than that. Not that they had any need for where this refrigerator was, but since they'd taken it as a gift, they had to figure they had to run it somewhere. Bad idea. Change your signs to LEDs, particularly in various places we've got it. Quite simple. Saves you 85%. And if you're doing new buildings, for sure you're going to put these in, as with all of the other changes. Okay, now comes to the big number stuff. Heating, cooling, domestic hot water, which I truly love. I like the light part too, but okay. First, is your heating 95% or better efficient? And to be clear, just so we're clear on it. Boilers deal with hot water. So it's like a teapot on the stove. They generate hot water, and they either generate hot water that goes through pipes, or they generate steam that goes through pipes. Either way, it deals with water, or it can go through a fan coil unit, which is hot water that goes, it's like on your car, that has a fan blowing over this coil, and then it creates hot air that blows into your spaces. Furnaces generate directly hot air. Basic difference, because the equipment is very different. And you tend to use furnaces mostly residentially, although many houses of worship have furnaces in them, but they're better solutions than furnaces. Key thing to check, you don't need to understand necessarily what AFUE means, just follow this. The higher the rating, the better the piece of equipment. You want 95%. It's readily available in hydronic hot water boilers and in furnaces if you're doing that. If you're doing steam, it's a little lower because you have to get water to 212 degrees. Where on a hot water system, you can get it to only 110 or 120, 140, 180, somewhere in that range, depending on how much you got to heat. Yeah. Better solution. And on-demand hot water. So if you're heating by gas, your hot water by gas, and particularly for our churches, where you've got a few times where there's a lot of people there and then a whole lot of time where nobody's there, you want to use an on-demand, which has two advantages over a hot water tank. A hot water tank is at best 65% efficient, and it heats 24/7. If it's gas, there's no way to put a timer on it. You can't cut the gas off. If it's electric, yes, you can put a timer on it. But you're still at an efficiency that's much lower even than a on-demand electric. The key benefit for the on-demand, unlike your tank, which heats all the time, 24/7 to a temperature setting, is that only when somebody turns on the hot water tap does it generate hot water. And so when you put that in, and the other advantage, the typical tank has got a 5-year warranty, which generally means, unless you're really fortunate, on the second day after the 5-year warranty ends, the tank's going to start leaking. And so you're going to be replacing the tank every 5 years, where with a on-demand, right now they've got warranties at 12 to 13 years because they're relatively newer in the US. What we know from this sort of equipment in Japan and Europe, routinely 15 to 20 years. So that piece of equipment is maybe twice the cost of your tank replacement, but it's going to last 4 times as long. And it's going to save you 30 to 50% depending on how bad your hot water usage has been. So that's your solution. If you have an electric, yeah, you can use a timer, but you can also use the on-demand, and you don't need to worry about the timer. All right, just as we had the percentage for the heating, boilers or furnace, for air conditioning, it's a simple number. You want to be at a minimum of 13 and do better if you can. You get to 19 or 20, yes. And one of the reasons for churches to do that is it's such a hard thing to get a vestry to say yes to replacing this stuff. So get the higher efficiency now because it also lasts longer. So you've put off that next excruciating conversation with the vestry because by the time you're going to replace this 15 or more years out, you will have gone past that memory term. Nobody on the vestry will remember the last one and what was gone through to get the high efficiency. So there's what the meaning of that term is, and the higher it is, the better it is, and that's what you want. All right. First question is, do you have programmable thermostats? And that's a programmable thermostat. But to the world of programmable thermostats, that's the equivalent of me to the age of my granddaughter. That's a programmable thermostat with really gray hair. It's old. Okay, it's programmable. But the question is, do you have smart programmable thermostats? A smart programmable, the technical term is adaptive recovery. Okay, if the regular programmable was $75, this is 125 maybe. They're all coming down. What it does is it remembers how long it took to get to the zone it's controlling to get to the desired temperature. So if you want your sanctuary in Albuquerque that's on air conditioning to get to 72 degrees on Sunday morning, and the last time you asked it, it took an hour and 15 minutes, and you want it to be there at 9:30, it's going to know to come on at 8:15. You don't have to guess. Terrific, because it doesn't forget, and people do. So if you know, for example, that the time it takes to get to your desired temperature changes as the season changes, you get into the maximum summer, it's going to take a lot longer to get cool than it is at shoulder seasons. In the depths of winter, it's going to take a lot longer to get warm than at shoulder seasons. Programmable adaptive recovery smart understands that. You don't need to teach it. It was born to do this for you.
The best thing about our new ones is that if someone turns up the heat, it'll only do it for an hour or so, and then it'll flip back instead of staying forever.
Right.
You walk in the next morning and it's 75 because somebody did it.
Because they didn't do it. So the programmable also, you want a 7-day, not a 5 and 2, because you get 4 set points in a day. And if you if it happens to be in a zone that you don't, it's not scheduled to be used, it's Tuesday and it's the guild room, not going to be used all day, you simply have it set at your setback. So if it's like in the Northeast and it's warm, we have it set back to 58. Somebody comes in, turns it up, and they come in at 10, we've got it set back at 12. We've got it set back at 5. We've got it set back at 10, so it'll automatically go back. Now, we also had, I have to make a confession here in the presence of the bishop. We have at our church a lot of 12-step groups, and the people who come in early for 12-step groups to make the coffee come in and say, oh, we got to get it warmer. So the first thing we did was put these plastic boxes on that have locks. It's a time. We're almost done. These are my timers, which is appropriate on the thermostat. Thank you. So we had them in locks. They'd break them open because they thought it was very gracious to make sure it was warm enough when everybody got there. Well, we already had it set so it'd be warm enough for everybody got there. So what we did was what I refer to as placebo thermostats. We locked the box, we painted the box black, and then we put one of those manual thermostats on the outside, connected to nothing. They came in, turned it up. They went about making their coffee. By the time everybody got there for the meeting, it was warm. They were happy. So there are ways you do this. Okay, quick things to finish and do interrupt. Are the ducts or pipes insulated? Okay, this is in the boiler room. The boiler room doesn't need to be heated. Put insulation on the pipes so that the heat that gets generated goes to where the heat needs to go. You want the hot water into the room, not the boiler room. And that's the sort of thing, again, you can do as a workday, and people learn, and the advantage of workdays is they get over their fear of these things. None of us really got brought up dealing with boilers and hot water tanks or any of those things, air conditioners, and so you need to know that. And teenagers particularly love to climb all over this stuff and do things so that you can have this wonderful event for them. Basic actions. Now, this is thinking about strategy and how to do this. 3 levels. We are, after all, a Trinitarian tradition, so of course it had to be 3 levels. Low-hanging fruit, routine manageable dollars, and got to do it even if it's big dollars. So, what are some examples here? Low-hanging fruit. The 0.5 gallon per minute faucet aerators. As I said, $2 to $4. Any of you sitting in this room can replace them yourselves. It's that easy. Pair of pliers, bingo, you're set. LED light bulbs. Especially, if this were a sanctuary, and this is actually a lower ceiling than the sanctuary we've got at All Saints, that ain't easy to get to. So among the other reasons that you want to go for LEDs, aside from the fact that Bud will love you for it because you're caring for creation, and that the vestry and the treasurer will love you for it because the electricity bill's going down, is that the sexton or whomever who has to go up there and change them is going to love you, because once you're up there and done, you don't have to go up again for a long time. Smart thermostats, and then with some of the money you're doing, buy offsets. It's a way in which there's various organizations around the country. Carbon Fund is one of them, carbonfund.org, in which you can take some of the money and you say, okay, you can use this, and they do plantings that generate offsets for carbon dioxide and so forth. And so what you're doing is contributing to actions which also reduce carbon footprint. Because, well, you can't, it's not just 50%. There are some churches, I will show you in a minute, who can get to zero in terms of what your carbon footprint because of the way you use it and do offsets. Basic routine manageable stuff. Dual flush toilets. There's conversion kits that are only $20. You can get the whole toilet for $225, $250, work fine. On-demand domestic hot water, depending on how much you're replacing, $1,200 to $2,500. But there'll be a lot of those in the Green Grant applications. High efficiency refrigerators. Your refrigerator's old anyhow. You can see how much you're using up, and if you're concerned about return on investment and you've got somebody who's truly in love with the Kingdom of Wall Street on your vestry, you can prove to them how fast it's coming back, how quickly this money is going. And again, all the product lists and ratings you can find out, and that helps you quantify it. And then your big actions: heating, cooling, roofing, windows, going to be more. One of those that Bud had pointed out earlier, St. Andrews Wellesley. Quick story about that to just tell you. Building that had grown like Topsy, steam heat. I mean, it looked Topsy, but Topsy took 60 years to get all of the building parts in there. Steam heat, oil fired, and they started to have leaks in the pipes that to deal with them was costing them $20,000 a year. Well, in a big place, and you've got a preschool program and everything going, you got to do this. And the second year into this, finally somebody had the wisdom to say, why are we doing this? It seems to be getting worse. And sure enough, pipes, steam pipes, have a limited life. And they were rotting through from all of the rust from inside and out. And so they did an analysis, figured out what to do. Bingo. They went from steam to hot water, from probably a 75% efficient boiler to a 95% efficient boiler system, like the pictures that were shown from St. James, to 34 zones, which tells you how much the building was used in different patterns and all over the place. They saved $30,000 a year on top of the $20,000 they were throwing away and fixing. $660,000 to do the whole thing. Okay, return on investment, 22 years paid for everything. But all of that distribution is going to last infinitely because they use PEX. It's a type of plastic pipe that isn't going to rust. And the other reason for doing this, the same reason that the people 100 years ago had built the church and said, we want to have something that will be there for God's glory and for our children and grandchildren and those who are coming. So you have to have the time, when you make these decisions, the time horizon of what it is God is asking you to do and for whom and for what period of time. The standards of the Kingdom of Wall Street have not done well for Wall Street, and they certainly won't deal well for for the kingdom of God, which is what we are following. And should you think that this isn't possible, on my way over from LA, where our granddaughter lives now, we stopped at Flagstaff and worshiped at Church of the Epiphany. Who can tell me what those are? Solar panels. Not just solar panels, but in fact, they are now getting a check from the electric company every month because they cover all of their electricity and some other money. They're doing that much. And once they get their LEDs in, they're going to do better. So that can be done, and there's several ways to do it. In their case, believer gifts. There are people in our parishes for whom doing the right thing, being green, matters. Creation care is an act of faith. They also recognize that green grows two ways, one of which you take to the bank. So they were able to pay for it all out of that, combined with the utility rebates in Arizona, because that's beneficial, so you do that. And if you're not in that position, and many parishes aren't, think PPA. This is in the thumb drive. Power purchase agreement. Basically has a for-profit company, puts it on there. You enter into a contract to buy the electricity from them. Typically starts out at 20% less than you're paying the electric company, so you're starting off better to begin with. And then they are able to pay for this out of the depreciation and plus what you're paying for them. And then after 15 years, you get the panels for $1. You had a question? Power purchase agreement. And most of the there are installers of photovoltaics, PV, in all of the states, and you can go to that. If you can't immediately find somebody wherever you are to do this, you've got my card, email me. I can track somebody down through who we've done this with. Doing it that way is zero cost to the parish. And as somebody pointed out at the session earlier this morning, one of the advantages of doing something that is overtly creation care is that it is evident to those younger generations who are saying, why should I be part of this anachronistic organization? It's even better than a Palm Sunday march. Well, no, the PPAs that I know of, all you're getting into, and this is if it's a 2 arm's length, because the ones that we've done in Massachusetts through Mass Interfaith Power and Light, they start out at about 20% lower than what they're paying the electric company, and that's the only money the parish is putting in. They install the panels. All the costs are on their side. Now, so the only issue becomes, really how they do the yield, their internal calculation. But generally speaking, any of these works really well. And if you're doing the believer gift side, as they did at Epiphany, and their yield, your savings goes up. And another alternative, in fact, would be working with an installer if you happen to have a few deep pocket folks in the parish for whom creating a corporation that put it on and they get the depreciation. I mean, that's a double hit in the parish, and you could do it that way too. So all of these possibilities, from the low-hanging fruit, good yield, low cost, up to even the big ones, in the context of what we're asked to do in our biblical heritage, these are no-brainers. It's just is really that way. And not doing it simply means you're going to be left like St. James in Cambridge was. You saw that ugly, terrible boiler room that Bud pointed to and said, which one do you want? You don't want the one on the left, because that boiler was so bad. When I visited there and took that picture, I said, this boiler is about to die. Well, it hung on for 2 years. But its funeral was one frozen February morning when there was a funeral at 10 o'clock in this giant sanctuary, and it gave up the ghost at 8 o'clock. The funeral had to go on. The only question left was how many people were going out feet first. It was so cold. I got a call the next morning. What should I do? And I said, get on your knees and beg God's forgiveness because you have sinned. Sloth was absolutely what he did, the head of that property committee and the vestry and everyone else who didn't face reality. A dying boiler is going to die, and it's going to die in the most unhappy of times. And they had a lot of apologizing to do. And then, when they got it all changed, I also told them the name of a mechanical engineer who would get it solved, and they did. And when it changed by the next heating season, they were down by 50%, saving over $20,000 a year. And they had lost 2 years of not doing that and had the embarrassment of the frozen funeral. You know, if you can't do something because God wants you to, at least do it because you don't want to be embarrassed. And here is, and it's on the thing, that's how to reach me, the direct way, the phone number, which is right here on my hip. And I'm happy to help. Do as Bud has suggested. Be in contact with the Interfaith Power and Light in your state. There are 39 chapters. And
yeah, I want to speak to that. I think we couldn't do half of what we're doing in the Diocese of Massachusetts for green grants, green loans, and some of the creation care, simple acts and things, if it weren't for a close working relationship with Mass Interfaith Power and Light. It's nice to have one of the founders be an Episcopalian. I'm hoping that if you don't have if you have an IPL in your state and you haven't begun to work closely with them, maybe a few churches in your diocese getting together with them might be a motivation to do that. They are excellent. And Tom, he'll answer calls. He talks to people all around the world about simple things and more complex things. So I don't, he means it when he says a call him. So that's, are there any other questions?
Local power companies, they gave us programmable thermostats for free for every place we had a thermostat. They're a great resource. And secondly, I think we're obligated to continue this program into the homes of our parishioners. I think that's and again, IPL has some great programs for convincing your parishioners that they need to be doing this.
Okay. I have a song to leave you with. Right. Oh, do you have something else to say? No. Okay. This is called We Are Saving Noah's Cargo, and it's sung to the tune of We Are Climbing Jacob's Ladder. So once you get the first line, and I'll give you the other lines, you just repeat them, right? We are saving Noah's cargo. We are saving Noah's cargo. We are saving Noah's cargo, children of the earth. Every creature has its purpose. Every creature has its purpose. Every creature has its purpose. Every creature has its purpose, children of the earth. Wolves and whales and owls and otters. Wolves and whales and owls and otters. Wolves and whales and owls and otters. Wolves and whales and owls and otters, children of the earth. Send a dove to find safe harbor. Send a dove to find safe harbor. Send a dove to find safe harbor. Send a dove to find safe harbor, children of the earth. In the rainbow, see God's promise. In the rainbow, see God's promise. In the rainbow, see God's promise. In the rainbow, see God's promise, children of the earth. Go in peace, children of the earth, to care for creation.